Hi.
Hi, good
How are
morning.
you?
How are
So
you?
good to hear you.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much. Thank you
of
so much
course.
for joining us. And everyone, if you guys have a question for Tara, tell us where
Yep.
you are right now because I know you're in the spin room,
Yeah.
right?
Well, no, we haven't made it to the spin room yet because there's a really long line behind me to get to there are only, CVS, the basement. There's
Oh,
only
yeah.
two elevators here. But this is where everyone's hanging out. We're all waiting. That's Alex Thompson from
Oh,
Axios.
hi,
Yeah,
everyone. How
yeah.
are
So
you?
we've got a
Nice to
ton of
see you.
some reporters you may or may not recognize. We're all just waiting. I don't know when we're going to get up
Oh,
there, uh, but
interesting.
we,
That seems weird. It should be open to everybody immediately, right?
yeah, you would think so, but because there are only two elevators, I think maybe we all have to
Yeah.
wait our turn. Probably should have planned that out a little bit better.
Yeah. Oh, well,
Yeah,
what can I say? I could say a
yeah.
lot, but I'm not going to. Anyway,
I know
Tara,
you. I was like, you would know best.
basically tell us a little bit about what people were saying, what members of the press were saying during the debate.
I mean, we were all kind of reacting to a lot of the cringy moments. Um, like there's a very like pleasant midwestern sort of debate in which it was almost like uncomfortable in the way that they got along so well. But they really did a good job of actually making points, discussing policy, doing essentially what like Donald Trump really couldn't do in the first debate. And it was civilized. It's like the way that debates used to be, right? They refer to each other by their proper titles, and they seem to almost like each other.
Yes, I
Tim,
know. I think my friend Wendy and I, who she was the executive producer for Larry King Live for 18 years, and we
yeah,
noticed how much more civilized this debate was than previous ones, to the
right,
point where was getting a little ridiculous with them
right,
nodding at each other in agreement. You'd almost felt like they were actually running mates. But I think
yeah.
the consensus is, Tara, can you move over just a teeny bit because
Is
I'm
it?
hearing so many of these people.
Oh, you know what? I can go into a room, a quieter room.
Well, okay,
Is that better?
yeah, I think that might be helpful, although I
Is
don't
it?
want you to miss the spin
It.
room. I think that
So, you know
even
what?
that's better.
The line is so long. I will.
Okay.
Um, I'm just hiding near a place you probably have been before as well. Feels
Anyway,
like,
I think
yeah.
a lot of people were saying that JD Vance was clearly the more
Oh,
experienced
yeah.
debater.
Hmm.
He was very smooth and sort of seamless in his delivery. I know that Tim Walz said before the debate, he sort of set expectations low, saying he
Yeah.
wasn't a very good debater in terms of just sort of style over, if you want to talk style initially over
Yeah.
substance. Was that the consensus among the people watching it
Oh,
where you are?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was surprised just by JD's demeanor. I think we always knew that JD was going to be better at debating than Tim Walz. He's been on television a lot. He's been practicing. He's been handling hostile interviews. He's been asked many, many times, you call Donald Trump Hitler. What do you say now? He's used to taking the rapid fire sort of with the press, right? He knows how to debate. And Tim Walz really hasn't been taking a lot of hasn't really been in that situation. He's not on television that much. He maybe takes one or two questions from the press here and there, but he's just not as skilled a debater as JD Vance is. And JD has been Trump's like Rottweiler up until this point, was how one of my colleagues described it, and said like he ended up sort of showing a bit of more like a poodle side. Like he was calmer and more relaxed. And Trump likes a pit bull. That's what he likes about JD Vance. And he showed, because like that's the other thing, Katie. JD Vance has some likability issues. We saw that in the polls, right? Like his unfavorables are his her favorabilities are low compared to Tim Walz, right? And so he had to work on that too. And I think he actually did that in the debate while also being able to effectively communicate Trump's policies. And he was able to communicate Trump's policies better than Trump was able to, right? And he did the pivot. He quickly pivoted to attacking Kamala Harris. He was good at what he was supposed to do. And Tim Walz, yes, they set the bar low. He said, I'm just a high school teacher, coach, Midwestern dad, also congressman, governor, who's obviously been on debate stages before, but this is the biggest debate stage of your life. So I guess we didn't expect much, but I think we were a little underwhelmed when he first came out. He was a little mealy mouthed, seemed really nervous. Somebody had tweeted, Meghan McCain tweeted that he looked like he was going to vomit. Um, and he really did look very uncomfortable. But then he started to pick up his steam. And he seemed to get really impassioned, actually, when he spoke about policy, because he actually seemed to know a lot about
Right.
policy. It was
Right.
just in the initial communication, and I think he wasn't really good at handling direct questions and really the jousting part. I don't think he's very comfortable
Well,
in that position. Whereas
let's
JD
talk.
is.
Let's talk about a couple of times where Tim Walz seemed to evade a question. One
Right,
was, and can you explain this discrepancy about his time in China and Tiananmen
right.
Square? And he ultimately said he misspoke when he was pressed. But can you explain that to people watching what the whole thing is about?
Yeah, so he basically said that he was in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square riot, which was huge. But he wasn't there. He claims he was. This was something that he's long said before, and he has a history of sort of exaggerating situations. It kind of actually reminds me of Brian Williams in some sense. With the, like, I was saving puppies, or I was up in the air in the middle of, and they were shooting at us. It's like he always sort of seems to exaggerate or embellish or seem to place himself in the center of conflict, even when it comes to his military record. He sort of embellished that a little bit, and this was another example of that. And the story just came out on CNN yesterday, and there have been developments over 24 hours, and he hasn't had to face the press and really answer. And this was the first time, and his answer was very mealy mouthed. I'm a knucklehead. He first went into like trying to win people over by his, common roots. And, this is just sort of the folklore of being a Midwestern. We like to tell stories, big and small. And, I routinely went to China so often that I couldn't like tell the difference between the dates. But it really, at the end of the day, his response, like, I'm a knucklehead, I don't know that really passes. You've been on the other end of this. You've interviewed your fair share of politicians in the center of limelight. I mean, it's like, it's laughable, like at that level, to have that kind of response.
So if people think that he should have just been more forthright and said, I misspoke, but I think there's some danger to that too, because he had sort of the mistake he made about his military service and weapons of war and going into battle with weapons of
Right.
war that was really blown up by the GOP. So
Yeah.
these things are probably not super helpful. Having said that, I think JD Vance made some comments that were not super helpful about we need to make sure that doors are locked during school shootings, which I think is a
Mm.
pretty sad and sort of
Yeah.
inadequate
Fortifying
answer.
fortifying the windows. Is that really the answer? It was not. Yeah, he did not seem to have the right answer either. I just think the way he's a smooth talker. He can talk through these things so quickly and on to the next in the way that Walz handled it. And Walz actually went back to it and acknowledged at the end of the debate, I have a propensity to misspeak. And it was in a way going back to the Tiananmen Square, answer. And it was surprising because a lot of people want to move past that, but I think it just shows you, he's not as polished. And in these times, I mean, it might be an asset because people don't really like polished politicians anymore, right? So maybe some people thought, oh, shucks, he's just a guy, telling a tall tale, and he got a little over his skis, and he's just a regular, he's a regular guy. He's not a politician, right?
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
then they might
So
look at JD and think he's this polished kid who became a senator at like 38. He's a slick guy.
and well, tell me since we mentioned some of Tim Walz's uh, more trying moments, where did JD Vance, I mentioned the securing doors in schools, but where do you think that he had some weaknesses?
I think at the end, I think the January 6th conversation was certainly the one in which he struggled the most. And I think actually Tim Walz like really redeemed himself for all the viewers that stayed on and hung on until the end of the debate when he asked him, like, why didn't you certify the 2020 election or something along the lines, or would you have certified the 2020 election? And he just completely evaded the question. He said, that is a very damning non-answer. And it was just like he cut right through the bullshit. And to me, that was one of the the highlights of the debate if you stuck around that long to hear it.
What do you
And
think
yeah,
of this? What do you think of JD Vance's effort to really kind of not answer and not address January 6th
mhm,
in a wholehearted way, and
yeah.
use this censorship argument that that was a bigger threat to democracy?
I just think he was talking in circles. I really do. I think this is the hardest. The problem with the January 6th topic is he's not really having a conversation with the viewers. He's having a conversation with Donald Trump, who's watching him. And, Donald Trump does not want to admit that he lost the election. He does not want to take any blame for January 6th. And so he knows that this is not, he can lose this topic with the viewers, and that's okay. He can't lose it with Trump because
I
he's the
thought it
vice
was
president ultimately, or the running mate. And so they can afford to lose this. But if he goes back home and Trump feels like he didn't defend him on this very sensitive topic, he blew it. Wouldn't have mattered how it went otherwise. So, and Trump wanted him. I know this from my sources who were helping with the preparation, that Trump really wanted JD to defend him at every turn, in the same way that Trump wanted to attack Kamala for every attack, right? Like he wanted to get in the tit for tat. That was what ruined it for Trump, right? That is why he lost the debate, and he essentially wanted JD to do the same thing for him. And I guess the compromise was letting Trump truth through the entire debate, and that
yeah.
was how they were able to get around it. And also, they acknowledged, like, listen, JD will defend you, but then he's got to pivot because we have an opportunity in the sense that some of these undecided voters still say they want to learn more about Kamala Harris, and so we need to use that time to define her, and we need to define her to the midwesterners. We need to define her to the rural voters, the suburban voters, and we have to do it in JD's voice and style. And this was something that Trump needed to understand, because he can be so narcissistic and just think, I want him out there defending me, and not
I was
realizing that this is an offensive. This is not a defensive fight,
I was
right?
surprised that it took Tim Walz a while to say that Donald Trump is still insisting that he did not lose the election.
Yeah.
And, I thought JD Vance's argument that he left on January 20th, that was a very specious argument,
Mm,
because he didn't. And I also thought Tim Walz could have talked about those 3 hours when the Capitol was being attacked, that Donald Trump did nothing.
right. Again, like, I just don't think Tim Walz is really good at this. I think he was in a very uncomfortable situation. He should have had more. He should have had more experience. Frankly, they should have had him do more interviews. There is some value to speaking to the mainstream press. They know a little thing or two about how to get, you know, how to get your soft spots, and it gets you ready, battle ready. And JD, in fairness, went out every weekend on the Sunday shows, to the point where he admitted that he lied and created stories about Haitians just to get the media's attention, which is insane. But at the same time, he knew that he was going to have to face that question, which he's already faced 10 times already. So by the time he went to the debate stage, he was like rattling it off like it was yesterday's news. Whereas Tim Walz, every question was he's being asked for the first time. And that's not easy. I mean, and I guess, I don't know, Katie, I was listening to thinking about you. How did you feel that the moderators did in terms of the fact checking? They're like GOP. I was watching on Twitter. They were freaking out over the fact that there was fact checking for JD. The mics were turned off. There seemed to be a lot of, like, kind of, I don't know, what they playing the refs from the beginning by saying they wouldn't do the interview with CBS 60 Minutes. What was your take on
I
that?
mean, I think that if you're moderating a debate, which I never have, and
Okay.
I've always wanted to, it's kind of a no-win situation no matter what you do.
Okay.
I mean, I think Margaret Brennan pointed out that the Haitians were there legally in Springfield, Ohio, filling a lot. She didn't say filling jobs. I'm adding that. And I think perhaps that they should have allowed JD Vance to explain that program, and because I think it's a complex thing, it's not,
Yeah.
the the program that allowed the Haitian immigrants to come to Springfield, Ohio. I thought it was fair. I thought they did a good job. And I think I tried to do the little thing on the screen at CBS where it brought you to fact checking, and mine didn't work.
The
So
QR
maybe,
code. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. I couldn't remember what it's called, the QR code, and it didn't work. I Googled it and I got on the CBS thing, and I spent a lot of time when I was following the Washington Post opinion columnists
Yeah.
who all had very interesting observations about everything. And I guess the bottom line is, though, is this going to matter really? It's going to help dictate what's going to be in the news cycle the next 24 hours.
You're right.
Other than that, do you think it'll have a big impact on voters?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. It's like these undecided voters, are they really watching the debate? I feel like they're just tuned out to politics altogether.
Hmm.
But I could be wrong. Maybe. I have to check in with my mom. She lives in North Carolina, and she's that undecided voter who's like, what's Kamala Harris really going to be like? You know, she voted for Obama, then voted for Trump, then voted for Biden. It's like, I can't. She asked about like their horoscopes. I have to ask her if she watched and what she thought. Listen to NPR,
Yeah.
oh my God. Wait till I tell her that we were on live, so
Well, well, you
she,
have to let me. You have to let me know what she
she's
said.
not,
And
she's a smart person. It's just, it's really depends. She thinks about pocketbook issues, really, I think, and safety and all of those issues really play in for her. And I'm sure she thinks about Dobbs, but it's like they can rank it. They only have so many things they can make decisions based on. And I do think that she asked me, like, what's it going to be like? What is Harris's administration going to be like? And I said to her, I think it's going to be a continuation of the Biden administration. It'll be very similar in a lot of ways. Um,
and and I was going to ask you too. Do you think this will convince Donald Trump to do another debate with Kamala Harris? Because I know that's up in the air. Or he said no.
I don't think so, actually. I think if JD lost, I think Trump would feel like he had to do it. Um, but I don't think JD lost. I think a lot of people would say JD won, especially on the right. I'm already getting texts and from people inside Trump's camp, and they're super happy. And but they were like, "Are you surprised?" And I'm like, "Kind of, because he's been an asshole on TV for a while." And seriously, I thought he was going to come off like this total smartass, and everyone was just going to be like, "Ugh, gross." And maybe he did to a lot of people, but I actually found him more endearing. And I've like spoken to him, a few times. He's not always the most engaged person. Sometimes he doesn't seem that happy to be there, to be honest. But he actually had a decent disposition.
Well, I think that
And
was a clear strategy on
right,
his behalf,
right.
knowing very clearly that his likability factor is in the toilet, that he
Yeah.
has said so many things that are offensive and off-putting to huge swaths of voters, including American women,
Yeah.
especially single, childless, cat
Dog
owning women.
lady over here.
So I think he went out and said, I can't be that jerk.
Yeah.
I need to soften my edges. And I think he did a very effective job at that. I think probably, what are you hearing from Democrats who are texting you?
Um, like they're kind of texting me lame lines like, oh, he called out RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, how lame.
No, but
You
what
know,
are they saying about Tim Walz's performance?
they know it was shaky. I mean, they know it wasn't the best, right? And they're kind of like hoping that he can slide by and is like, oh shucks, like you kind of feel bad for the guy a little bit. I think that's
Yeah.
sort of,
Well,
you kind of have to.
I didn't think it was a disaster for him.
No,
I think he was more halting and less, certainly not as smooth as JD
right.
Vance. But I didn't feel like, other than a couple of moments where he didn't seem that forthcoming. I thought he comported himself pretty well, all
Yeah,
things
no,
considered.
I think he was actually effective at delivering her policies, and he was very emotional, especially on talking about some of these policies like healthcare and gun
And
control,
abortion
um, and and
rights.
abortion rights. Yeah, he seemed to really know the policies really well, and he made some decent points, and even like questioning the idea of, building housing on government lands. He's like, well, in Minnesota, we don't have any government lands around Minneapolis, but that doesn't help us. This is supposed to be so. And he talked about parks. People love parks. Like you don't think about that, right? And he talked in more of a humane way than JD did. JD was like, we need nuclear power plants and energy and money, money, money. He went back to inflation, economy, immigration, safety, dark America. Visions of America were dark for him, and visions of America were bright for Tim Walz. And that's what they wanted. It's a joy campaign versus the terror and fear campaign. And you just got that in every answer. Every answer pivoted to exactly where they felt they needed to go. JD to your incumbency, you are the incumbent, and this is horrible. We need to go back to the way it was. And Tim Walz is like, we are the future. It is bright and it is wonderful. And we've already laid the seeds down for a bigger and better future. So, and they knew where each other's weaknesses were. They weren't there for, like, in a way, the fact that they didn't spar too much was a good thing, because they weren't up there for each other. They were up there for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And if it was too much about them, it would have been a failure. Really, and a loss. And I do think if it was too much about the two of them, if it got into a pissing match, if it was really talked about for more than a day, then Trump maybe would want to do a debate as well. But I think Trump's probably okay with this one, to be honest. I really do. I think but I do think the crucial question would have been how he answered January 6th.
It
If
would be
JD Vance said he
nice
lost.
to hear that conversation between the two of them following the debate.
I know. I'm also just interested to see how they play it afterwards. Or like, I don't know if you saw, but Megyn Kelly was like, F CBS for cutting the mics and this and that. These are the stories that follow. Like, Trump apparently, telling people he wants to sue David Muir. I mean, he's denied that. He has no grounds, obviously, but the stories that follow about the media, right? Those are going to be the stories that live on for a day or two longer, probably. And, you can already sort of hear the GOP chorus.
Yeah.
No, I think it was fair.
Well, the media is a convenient whipping
Yeah.
voice anyway. So I think they are just reinforcing views that people on that side of the aisle feel about most mainstream media outlets. So anyway,
Who do you think won?
I think JD Vance was certainly the more experienced debater, smoother. I do think that Tim Walz had some humanity, and I think his lack of sort of smoothness was at times endearing and at times slightly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So so I don't know, wins and loses. I don't know. I don't think it's that clear.
Yeah. It's kind of a little bit like the Harris-Pence debate, where you didn't really know who won or lost either,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
The
and I
bug
think
won.
people who liked Tim Walz before the debate like him more now. People who really like JD Vance are proud of his performance. So I would say it's kind of a draw, but that's just from what I saw.
I think you're right. I think it's a draw. I do think that I know a lot of. I think for a long time people really mocked JD, and said it was such a terrible choice to pick JD Vance. He's so fringe. He's so fringe. He's so fringe. He's MAGA, 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 and he was effective today in softening his image.
Yeah.
I really think. I think we're going to see his favorabilities go up. Honestly,
I agree.
and I think
Now,
Tim
how often
Walz helped him though, and that's the problem. Is that Tim helped him with his favorability, and that's not what you want to do there on the debate stage, because
right?
they got along a little too well.
I was going to say he might have gone a little too overboard with
Right.
with the Minnesota nice stuff, but
Exactly. He's like, you're a
we'll
good guy,
see.
JD. It's like, no, you're not supposed to say that. He's a monster.
And also, so the one debate performance doesn't necessarily change someone's ideology. I mean, there's a lot of things that he has said that I think trying to soften his image was pretty transparent tonight.
I think it was to us, but I don't think it was to everyone.
Yeah.
He showed up with the pink tie. Like, come on.
For breast cancer awareness.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I just, but if
Anyway,
you
all right.
actually listen to him on the shows that he's on and all of the podcasts and everything, it's a totally different human being.
Oh, I
He's
know.
a truly chameleon.
I've watched many
Yeah.
of them. All right, I want to get you into the spin room so you can
Okay.
finish reporting. Tara
Yeah.
Palmeri from Puck
Thanks.
News. Great to
Yeah.
see you. Tell your mom hi and
I
tell me what she thought.
well. I have to. I'll send this to her. She'll love this.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. See you
Bye.
later. Bye.
See you.
Thank
Bye.